Hello and welcome to another edition of Film Club, and I just watched this movie last night. I wanted to get out a review of it quickly, and I was excited to watch this movie. I let it sit in my digital queue for a while, partially because the actor, and I'm going to butcher his name, Anton Yelchin, I probably said his name wrong, his horrific death last summer, and after he died, and it was a pretty horrific death how he died, I was kind of like, I don't really want to watch this right now because I don't want to see that guy on screen for 2 hours after he just died. That's weird. And so I let it sit for a long time. And I finally just, last night I was going through, I was looking for something that was 90 minutes because I didn't want to watch, some sprawling epic 3-hour movie. And I came across, I was like, you know what, enough time's passed that I should probably give this one a watch. So I sat down and watched The Green Room, or I think it's just called Green Room. I believe this was his second to last movie before he died. His last film appearance was Star Trek Beyond. Green Room is an interesting movie. Unfortunately, I don't think it's a particularly good movie or a very effective thriller, and I will explain why. Now, the acting in this movie is really good. You have Anton Yelchin, one of his final performances, and you also have Patrick Stewart, who's always good. It's a very interesting thriller, but it's one of these movies, and this is where I have a problem with it. It is one of the kind of movies where you read all this stuff online, and people are like, go into this movie, don't know anything about it, you're going to be blown away and kind of thing. And so I was expecting a lot. I expected a lot from this movie. I feel like it doesn't deliver at all on what was the anticipation was, and it's one of those movies where a lot of hype was surrounding it, and it fell flat for me. The film is about a young punk rock band who, obviously they're struggling punk rock band, and they go to play a gig. The gig sucks. They kind of get in an argument with this guy who they're bunking at his house for the night. And he's kind of like their manager, I guess? I don't know. They don't really explain, but he's like, hey, you know what? My cousin, he works at this bar a couple hours from here. I'm gonna call him or text him and get you guys a gig there. You'll be able to get in. It'll be really simple. Cool, whatever. So they drive up there and they get there and everything, and it's very clear as they get there and they meet some of the people, and when they get there, like, all right, cool, you guys are on in like 20 minutes. All right, fine. They go to what's called the Green Room, which is basically where the band hangs out before and after the performance and that kind of stuff. So they go, everything, and as they're in this green room, there's a giant Confederate flag on the wall, and there's a bunch of Nazi paraphernalia on the wall, and they're kind of like, okay, like, this is kind of weird. I guess this is like a neo-Nazi skinhead bar. And so the Aunt Yelkin's character's like, hey, I have an idea, because these people are already gonna hate us. Let's go out there and play a cover of the Dead Kennedys song, Nazi Punks F Off. They do. They go out there, they have their set, and like at first these Nazi people hate them. They're throwing bottles at them, they hate it. And then after that they start playing some of their original songs and they get more into it and they become more accepted. So they have a pretty decent set. They get paid pretty well, considering their last gig only paid $6 split between 4 ways. So that's really bad. So they get a pretty decent paycheck. Now the one girl, there's 4 people in this band. There's a girl and there's 3 guys. The girl in the band is like, hey, shit, I left my cell phone in the green room, and they were getting ready to leave. He's like, can you go get in? And Anton Yelkin's character's like, I'll just grab it for you real quick, whatever. So when he walks in this room, he looks on the floor and he sees a woman on the floor with a knife in her head. And he realized, like, some shit went down here, and he starts to freak out. And there's a bunch of, like, neo-Nazi people in the room, and they're just like, you shouldn't be in here, kind of thing. He's like, look, I didn't see anything. And he takes the phone, he goes to leave, and there's another girl in the room, and she's like, call 911. And he's like, okay. So he goes to call 911, and one of these neo-Nazis takes the phone out of his hand, and then there's a whole panic starts to happen, and all 4 of these bandmates are then shoved in this green room. And the one guy is like holding a gun, and he basically holds them at gunpoint, and he's like, all right, we need to figure this out, because obviously that side of it, they don't want to kill 4 people because now they have more bodies on their hand than the one that they have. And it sets off a whole motion of events in this film. The problem I have with this movie is it starts off very effectively. I think from the opening until the act of violence and what propels the driving motion of this film, I think it's really good. Obviously, the acting is top notch between Ant Yelkin. He was a great upcoming actor, and it's a real shame that he's no longer with us. One of my favorite performances of him, and you're gonna laugh when I tell you, but I really enjoyed this movie. It's a remake, and I enjoy the original and I enjoy the remake both for their own merits. But the 2011 remake of Fright Night, the original Fright Night from the 1980s, is one of my favorite horror movies of all time, and I thought the remake did a really good job of taking that story and plopping it in a current timeline. So he did a really outstanding job in that movie, and I've always thought he was a good actor. I enjoyed his performance as Chekhov in the recent Star Trek movies, and it's a shame he's no longer with us. He does an excellent job here. The problem with this movie is it becomes too unbelievable too fast. These people sit in a room. At one point, they finally overpower the guy that's holding them in there. They lock themselves in this room. They kind of put a couch in front of this door, and the rest of this movie is them having a shouting match between them and the leader of this neo-Nazi group, which is led by the great Patrick Stewart, who does an outstanding job. But it's unbelievable, and the amount of stuff that they go through, and there is some horrific violence in this movie. I don't think it was as awful as some of the stuff I read online, like, oh wow, it gets kind of gory. I didn't think it really got that gory. I've seen much, much worse. The rest of the movie is basically about them trying to get out and escape this situation. The problem I have is, after some of these bandmates start dying, dropping like flies, and that's what happens, and I'm gonna spoil this movie, but they start dropping like flies, you know. Ant Yelkin's character gets brutally stabbed as they try to open the door to hand the gun back to this neo-Nazi guy in exchange for the keys to their car, and instead they just slash him up, so his arm is all jacked up. And then they kind of duct tape it together. They start breaking the floorboards of this room that they're in, and then they discover underneath is like a drug lab, and that's the way they're going to try and get out. It just spirals out of control, and the problem is that by the end of this movie, after every bandmate is dead with the exception of Ant Yelkin's character and then this other girl who was trapped in the room that also witnessed the murder but's not part of their band, these two then display a level of hardness where instead they decide, no, we just need to kill everybody. So they start killing these neo-Nazi people as they come in that are trying to kill them. And that's the part of this movie where I was like, okay, this is starting to get unbelievable, because I can understand from a survival instinct to kill someone that is trying to kill you. But to then stick around and kill more people rather than you're trying to get away, it just doesn't come off as believable. So the end of this movie, Ant Yelkin's character shaves his head to look like a skinhead, and then they kind of give each other like fake tattoos on their face with permanent marker, him and the chick. And after staging a weird kind of coup against two of these people, they then take another character, neo-Nazi character, hostage, and they start going out into the woods. And what's going on the other side of this shit is Patrick Stewart's character is trying to stage kind of like a murder to the dead bodies of these other bandmates and using their van and all that kind of shit. So they walk into them displaying this whole, you know, fake crime scene before they're going to call the cops, and they end up just executing them, and that's the end of the movie. So Ant Yelkin's character and this other girl execute these three people, and that's literally the end of this movie. And even Ant Yelkin's character, when the other girl just, because she's the one that shows most of the brute violence in this film, when she uses her shotgun to kill one of these three people that are left at the end of this movie, kind of looks like, I guess we're killing these people, and then they just kill the other two, and they kill Patrick Stewart. Like, all these people die at the end of the movie. And that was my problem, was like, if your whole basic instinct when you're put in a situation like this is to survive, you would not stick around and kill all these other people. You would get the hell out of there and get away from this situation. You wouldn't stay around and kill people. That's just not how it works. And it's unbelievable that some punk kid in a punk rock band now all of a sudden displays a level of hardness for killing people. I had a major problem with this while I watched this movie, and it took me out of the story of this movie. And it's a real shame, because I think there are some really effective, suspenseful scenes in this movie that are squandered by how the rest of this movie unfolds towards the end. So I'm going to give this movie 1 thumb down. It's not 2, because I don't think it was terrible, but it's not something I would watch again anytime soon. I think there are some good performances in it. Like I said, Patrick Stewart and the late Ant Yelkin, I think they do an outstanding job with what they're given. However, I think that for an effective thriller, you have to have some level of believability. And it does show that for the first like 30 minutes of the movie. And then when they start turning against the neo-Nazis, and then at the end of the movie they just decide like, screw it, we're just going to kill all of them. That's where I was taken out of the movie, like, all right, this isn't really believable anymore. So one thumb down. Not the worst thing I've ever seen, but not necessarily a great movie. As always, remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. And thanks for watching the video.